Hello and welcome to the Neutral Corner number 20th episode of the Neutral Corner for the week of November 28th. I'm Michael Montero. Let's get it started. So I'm back from Vegas. I'm a little stuffy. I think I'm still hungover. I've been back there twice in the past few weeks for Bradley Rios and for Cotto-Canelo. It's just been a lot of traveling recently, a lot of working. I need a vacation, but it's been really good. We got a lot of boxing to talk about, so let's get it started with this week's Ring Walk. This week's question is from YouTube, from Ghostface Killer 74, and it reads, Cotto refuses to pay sanctioning fees and gets stripped of the WBC belt. My question is, are title belts becoming irrelevant? Do titles mean anything anymore? Great question, man. This is something that a lot of boxing fans have been asking for years, because it used to be there was one title, then two, then three, and now there's four. Some fans go back and forth about which belts are relevant, which aren't, the different sanctioning bodies. Some people think they don't matter. Some fans just recognize the linear title. And pretty much my opinion, as with most things in boxing, it's a lot of gray area, dude. Let's start with this. There's a difference between a champion and a titleist, okay? At heavyweight, Vladimir Klitschko is the champion. Deontay Wilder is a titleist. All right, big difference there. So even though Wilder has that WBC title, and that matters to him, nobody in their right mind considers him the heavyweight champion. That's Vladimir Klitschko. So the casual boxing fan might not understand the difference, but hardcore fans, educated fans, they understand that difference. Then you look at a situation like light heavyweight, okay? The light heavyweight division. Adonis Stevenson won, I believe it was also the WBC title and the linear title by knocking out Chad Dawson a couple years ago. Really hasn't done shit since then. He fought Andres Fanfara in a good fight. He's a tough, good opponent, but everybody else has been pretty much worthless. Meanwhile, Sergey Kovalev has collected 3 titles, right? He got the other 3 major titles, I believe. And Adonis was just stripped by Ring Magazine because they have a policy, if you don't fight a top 5 fighter within 2 years, they strip you. That's a Ring Magazine policy. So technically, if you go by that linear championship thing with the Ring Magazine, now that is vacant. So now you have a situation where Adonis Stevenson has 1 title, there's no linear championship, and Sergey Kovalev has 3 titles. So there's not really an undisputed champion, but most people would say Sergey Kovalev is clearly the best. So that linear thing can get confusing as well. And let's drop it down to middleweight. Gennady Golovkin has 2 titles, Andy Lee has 1 title, and now, after beating Miguel Cotto, Canelo Alvarez has 1 title. And technically speaking, Canelo is the lineal middleweight champion. Even though Miguel Cotto won that title by beating a depleted, injured Sergio Martinez at 159-pound catchweight and defended it at a couple of catchweight fights, and then Canelo just won it at 155-pound catchweight, he technically has that lineal title that the boxing purists like. But I think most people would consider Golovkin the middleweight champion. So it's this muddied, cloudy picture, okay? One more quick example, featherweight. Lomachenko has a title, Selby has a title, Santa Cruz has a title, Russell has a title. 3 of those 4 titles are owned by fighters that are managed by Al Heyman. So in theory, those guys should all be fighting each other to get a unified champion. Now, whether Al Heyman does that, I don't know. But the featherweight division technically has 4 different champions. 4 different titleists, not any champions. So it's this confusing thing, man. I can go on and on here. I got my notes with every division. But relating this to Cotto's situation, let me just give everyone background in case you don't know. I'm sure you guys all know, but basically in the 13th hour, the WBC came to Miguel Cotto during fight week, just days before his fight with Alvarez, saying, hey, what's up with those sanctioning fees? And, by the way, step-aside money to give to Gennady Golovkin, who's technically your mandatory, who, you know, you were supposed to fight, but we said you could fight Canelo if you pay some step-aside money. So these fees added up to over $1.1 million. And basically, Cotto said, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. Not gonna pay it. Go ahead and strip me. So they stripped Cotto. Canelo Alvarez, he paid his sanctioning fees, which I think came out to, I don't know, $100 and something thousand of his purse. And so he got, you know, the WBC title was on the line for him, and he won it. So he has that title now. Now, as far as the step-aside money with Golovkin, that's where it gets muddy. From my understanding, and this has not been confirmed, this is just based on things I've heard, Cotto had some sort of agreement with K2 Promotions and Gennady's people. So that money was gonna go through the WBC to Gennady, but there was an agreement there. So if there was some kind of legal contract or something signed, we could possibly see some litigation from K2. Personally, just based on how I know those guys, I don't think they're gonna pursue anything. They got bigger fish to fry, screw it. For Cotto, I kind of understand why he did what he did. I kind of don't like what he did. You know, I tend to always side with fighters when it comes to a situation between the sanctioning body and the fighter. I tend to always side with the fighter. And to me, what it looks like, this is just me guessing, Cotto knew that having that WBC title, you know, Canelo wanted that. He knew that was his leverage to make big money in this fight. So he kind of said, hey, WBC, I'll pay step-aside money for Gennady, because he had no interest in fighting Golovkin, and I don't blame him at this stage of his career. I just don't blame him. He's fought everybody. He fought several fighters that were in better shape than the version of that fighter that Floyd Mayweather fought. I'll get into that a little bit more later. So I don't blame him, but basically, I think he knew that that chip, that WBC title, was his leverage to get the bigger money fight with Canelo Alvarez. So that kind of answers your question, right? Belts do matter to the fighters because they can use them as leverage. When it comes to international TV money, a championship fight gets bigger money for the promoter, for the fighter. So this being for a title got more money for Miguel Cotto. He got a guaranteed $15 million from Roc Nation. Had he fought Canelo instead, he wouldn't have got anywhere near that. It wouldn't have been nowhere near as big of a fight, and he probably would have got knocked the hell out. So he used that title as a bargaining chip. And then you look at a guy like Gennady Golovkin, the belts that he's collecting at the middleweight division right now are helping him build his name. We saw I just had a pay-per-view at David Lemieux. It only sold 150,000, right? And there's various reasons why, but even on the perfect situation, that wouldn't have done any more than 300,000 buys. Those title belts are his leverage to getting closer to a big fight. At some point, he's gonna have 3 of the belts, if not all 4 of them, in the division. And the big name fighters, if they want big money in a middleweight title fight, they're gonna have to fight Golovkin. It's the same thing at light heavyweight with Sergey Kovalev, who doesn't have nearly as much fan buzz as Golovkin does. And I think Kovalev's way more accomplished than Golovkin as a pro, but he just doesn't have the same personality and everything else. For Kovalev, the titles mean everything. If Sergey didn't have a title, who the hell would fight him? The only reason the guy gets fights right now is because he has those titles. So yes, the titles are still relevant, okay? When you get to a certain stage in your career where you're a superstar, right? Like Canelo just won this fight against Cotto. And he is now an established face of the sport. From what I'm hearing, this pay-per-view did about 1 million buys, possibly more. We're gonna find out in the coming days, but I know it at least did 950,000, somewhere in there. Way more than I thought. You guys know I predicted 650,000. Canelo's at a point now where he can literally next year, if he wants to, he can dump that WBC title, let Golovkin have it, and he could do a rematch with Cotto and make $10 million plus. He doesn't need that title. So look, Floyd didn't need titles. Floyd never unified titles, right? He never cleaned out a division and unified titles. He didn't need to. So there are some fighters that don't need them, and there are some fighters that desperately need titles. So in the end, the belts and having all these different sanctioning bodies, guys, that's not going away because fighters use them as a bargaining chip. I know that was long-winded, but I hope that helped give a little clarity on this extremely complicated issue. All right, so there was a lot of boxing action last week. There was a couple of cards in Las Vegas on Friday night, but I'm only going to briefly talk about one. Gilberto Ramirez, the undefeated super middleweight I told you guys about last week. He's one of top prospects right now, undefeated prospect, and he won a decision in a workmanlike performance. It was not, not a special statement kind of fight from him or anything. Maybe that just kind of is who he is. He did show some improvement from when I saw him back in January, but what's important about this fight is he became the mandatory for one of the belts that's actually owned by Arthur Abraham right now. And I'll talk about his fight with Martin Murray in just a second. But for Gilberto Ramirez, now he's the mandatory for that belt. And since he's with Top Rank, one of the power brokers in the sport, you'd have to think that when that fight goes to purse bid next year, the Abraham Ramirez fight, Top Rank will try to win that purse bid to bring that fight to the United States. They definitely don't want to travel over to Germany to fight Arthur Abraham for his title. Speaking of Arthur Abraham, he won a split decision Saturday in Germany against Martin Murray. He won by the scores of 116-111, 115-112, and one judge had it 115-112 for Murray. And as with most of these fights for Martin Murray in these tough championship fights, these close fights, there's a lot of people out there that felt he won, not just this one judge. Murray was docked a point in the 10th round. I believe it was for holding. And, that point deduction, some people complained about it, but ultimately it had no bearing on the scores of the fight. For Murray, he's had a couple of chances now, and he just seems to be one of those guys that gets really, really close, really competitive, does just enough to lose close, controversial fights like this. And, this is probably his last chance at a world title. It's not just in Germany, guys. I think Germany gets beat up on a lot with the judges over there. They have a reputation for going for the house fighter, probably more than any other country. But you're going on the road there, you gotta really put your stamp on it to get a decision sometimes. And Murray just didn't do that. So, as I mentioned now, Gilberto Ramirez, he is the mandatory for Arthur Abraham. Expect those two to fight next year. Expect that fight to come to the United States, possibly at StubHub, where Abraham has fought before. There's a big Armenian population out here. That contingency would show up. They showed up for him when he fought Andre Ward a few years back. Also on Saturday in the UK, here's an example of a fighter leaving it out of the judges' hands. Anthony Crolla scores a 5th round knockout. It was a left hook to the body against Perez, wins that WBA lightweight title. This was a rematch. In the first fight in the summer, Perez won. It was a disputed decision. Many people feel this was the robbery of the year, right? And not just British media, but international press thought this was a really, really bad robbery. And Crolla just left it out of the judges' hands. He basically, if you thought Martin Murray beat Arthur Abraham this weekend, well, this is kind of what Martin Murray needed to do, right? Crolla, it was actually a majority draw after 4 rounds. So this was a close competitive fight, but he closed the show with that left hook to the body. And look, now he has a title. There's another British lightweight with a title, Terry Flanagan. He has the WBO title. Both of those guys are Manchester residents. So Wouldn't it be great if we could get some unification? Lightweight is one of those divisions that's just up in the air. There's no clear-cut top guy in that division. There's no real champion. It's a bunch of titleists. Wouldn't it be great if we could get a British super fight? I wouldn't call it a super fight, but a unification there in Manchester between Flanagan and Crolla. I think that'd be a fun fight, and it'd just establish a clear #1 in the lightweight division. But here in the US, there is also a card you might have heard about, Cotto-Canelo, and I was ringside for this one. I'm gonna briefly talk about a couple of the undercard fights, and then we'll get to the meat and potatoes, the good stuff, right? Ronnie Rios scored, in a pay-per-view opener, Ronnie Rios scored a unanimous decision over previously undefeated Jason Velez. Ronnie Rios is a Mexican-American from here in California. Velez is a Puerto Rican fighter. He took a title belt from Velez. And for Rios, you know, this was a good workmanlike performance. He was docked a point, I think, in the 6th round for a low blow. Don't quote me on which round it was, but I believe it was the 6th. I say minor upset because Velez, you know, was the slight favorite, but both of these guys are kind of right around the number 10 to number 12, you know, ranked fighter in their division. So, but now Rios has a title, and one thing that stands out to me is he lost last year by TKO, I believe, in a fight early in the rounds of a fight, and it was a pretty bad loss. And after this fight, he said, look, I proved with this performance that your career isn't over after a loss. I thought that was a really cool thing to say, and he's so right. People put way too much on a single loss. So Rios comes back, grabs a title, good for him, and a good performance. Then in the second fight, Guillermo Rigondeaux, who you guys know I've been critical of. He went in there against Filipino fighter Drian Francisco. If you never heard of Francisco, he's one of these fringe contender types who knows how to handle himself in the ring, but he's not a top-ranked fighter or anything like that. In fact, he was stopped in the first round of a fight just this May against a journeyman. So he's kind of that level guy. He's kind of that journeyman level guy that's supposed to give you rounds. Really perfect matchmaking for Rigondeaux. Francisco is supposed to give Rigondeaux rounds to get the ring rust off, but be right there to be hit, and he's able to be knocked out, right? He's shown he can be knocked out just this year. And Rigondeaux just stunk the joint out. There was boos throughout this fight, and they progressively got angrier. You know, I tweeted during the fight that the boos went from annoyed boos to angry boos. And at the very end of the fight, there was like a little smattering of applause. But to me, it kind of sounded like sarcastic applause. Like, oh, it's over. Damn it, it's over. But he wins unanimous decision. 2 of the judges had it 100 to 90. I think one judge had it 97-93. He gave 3 rounds to Francisco. I don't know how or why, maybe just out of anger. But look, for Rigondeaux, he landed 72 punches. This was a 10-round fight. He threw 347 punches, okay? Landed 72, 7 punches a round. Now, by comparison, Vasyl Lomachenko, who everybody likes to compare Guillermo Rigondeaux to because of their amateur experience and everything like that. Lomachenko fought a journeyman type fighter, actually a little bit better than a journeyman, a serviceable type of fighter in his last fight, Romulo Kosica, and he landed 334 punches before knocking out Kosica in the 10th round. So let's compare. Lomachenko lands almost as many punches as Rigondeaux threw in their fights and stopped his guy. Now, in fairness, Rigondeaux is coming off a long layoff, okay? And maybe he didn't have the greatest camp in the world. That's understandable. But this has happened several times with Rigo, okay? This isn't the first time he's been horrible to watch. At this point, Rigondeaux is one of those guys that is a one-hit wonder. He had that great performance against Nonito Donaire. It wasn't the most exciting fight, but he thoroughly dominated Nonito Donaire, who at that time I think was the Fighter of the Year. I think in the previous year he'd won Fighter of the Year. So that was a big hit for Rigondeaux. But right now he's kind of like one of those musicians that's a one-hit wonder and his follow-up album sucked, right? So what do you do with him now? Roc Nation just signed him to a contract. He has certain guaranteed paydays as part of that contract, but no network wants to put him on their air. So expect Roc Nation to throw Rigondeaux on pay-per-view undercards from here on out. Either that or maybe put him on a network like BET or something in little one-offs here and there. But that's where Rigondeaux is gonna go. So I wanna talk real quickly to the Rigondeaux cult that's out there in the Twitter sphere and the YouTube sphere. You guys know a few weeks ago I did a video about Lomachenko and Rigondeaux and talking about supposed double standards and mistreatment and all this kind of stuff. And some of you guys just beat me up in the comments and said I didn't know what I was talking about. And you know, this is just a pattern with Rigondeaux, and it's not just him, it's other boxers like him. There's some fans out there, and even some media members, who say things like, well, if you can't appreciate this boxing, go watch a barroom brawl, or go watch UFC, or go watch the wrestling, blah, 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 blah. Look, shut up. None of you are talking right now, because this was an example of what guys like me have been talking about. I have an expression that I use, okay? Yes, boxing is hit and don't be hit. Professional boxing is hurt and don't get hurt. That's the difference. And some of these guys who come up in the amateur system think that they can just tap, 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 spin, tap, 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 spin, tap, 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 spin, or literally tap, tap, tap in the first minute of a round, then dance for the last 2 minutes of a round and win fights that way. You can win professional fights that way if your opponent doesn't hit you back. Okay, that's what Rigondeaux did against Francisco Saturday night. But in the case of like Lara-Canelo last year, Canelo was hitting him back and landing him harder shots, and Lara gave that fight away. Either way, it doesn't entertain. And I think these guys who come out of the amateur system, they also think, oh man, I got all these gold medals. I won 300 amateur fights. I have all this merit. So people, fans, should just respect me for my craft. Fans respect you, Guillermo Rigondeaux. Fans respect you, but do they want to pay money to see you? And that's another thing. All of you Rigodites, and that's what I call the Rigo people, because it just sounds, you sound like a cult to me. The Rigodites cult. All you Rigodites, you weren't there in Las Vegas at the Mandalay Bay Saturday. I ain't see any of you, okay? I heard a few claps from some Cuban people, actual people from Cuba who came to the fight that were just cheering for their countrymen. Makes sense. But you American boxing fans who love Rigo's craft, I ain't see any of you spending money to fly to Vegas, spending money to buy a ticket, wearing your El Chacal t-shirt and cheering for Rigo passionately as everyone else in the place booed him, okay? You're big tough guys on Twitter, you're big tough guys on YouTube, but when I criticize a fighter like Rigondeaux, who by the way, I have on my pound for pound list. I rate Rigo above Gennady Golovkin on my pound for pound list. But when I criticize his style as the reason why he's not very marketable, when I say it has not a goddamn thing to do with him being black, when I say things like that and you just go to this place where, oh, well, you're just a casual. I'm a casual? I'm a boxing lifer. I've been involved in this sport my whole life. I've been to more fights than most of you have ever watched on TV, okay? Don't say shit like that. Don't say, this is real boxing in its purest form. There's no such thing as real boxing in its purest form. There are many different styles in this sport. Some guys are brawlers, some guys are boxer punchers, some guys are pressure fighters. There's different styles. That's what makes professional boxing great, is style matchups, okay? There's not one particular style that's superior to the rest. Now, let's talk about what followed the Rigondeaux-Francisco fight. There was a concert by reggaeton artist Yandel, who, I don't listen to that shit, okay? But apparently is a big deal, and apparently Rock Nation owns a piece of them. So bam, there was a concert. I wasn't particularly crazy about this. I don't know if we need concerts in the middle of pay-per-view cards. If anyone should have done a concert, it should have been Jay-Z or Beyonce. They were sitting there ringside, and their company, well, his company that he's the front man of, was putting on half the promotion. Maybe they should have done it, but whatever. One small complaint. I don't know if you guys, let me know in the comment section below if you could hear the explosions that went off during that concert. It sounded like bombs. I know it was just pyrotechnics for the concert, but considering what just went down over in Paris last week, pretty shitty choice, Rock Nation and Yandel and whoever else put this thing on. There was one big ass explosion, and I really couldn't see up in the crowd because of the way the lights and everything were going. But in the press section, we were all like, yo, what the fuck? We were looking around and just trying to figure out if something went down. And then a couple minutes later, another one happened. And there was some confusion by the ring. Like, what is this shit? And then we looked up at the Jumbotron thing, and that's all, we could really see clearly, and we saw that everything was okay. Really, really, guys, I know they meant no offense by it, but man, poor choice of showmanship in that concert. But anyway, the fight that followed, fight of the year, okay? For all you boxing purists out there, I'm sure you hated this fight. And after the Rigondeaux fight, which you just ate up so much, you turned this one off because this was just awful brawling, right? Just awful, awful. This wasn't real boxing. But for the other 99% of fight fans, this was the fight of the year. Takashi Miura from Japan came over with the title, defending it against Francisco Vargas. And right in the first round, the Mexican buzzed Miura, almost dropped him. But the Japanese kid, steadied himself and started boxing and really was landing some nice straight hard shots down the pipe. And in the fourth round, dropped Vargas with a shot that landed right under his right eye. I saw it, because it was perfect from where I was sitting ringside. It just had a straight shot of it, my vantage point. And he just put it right on the orbital bone, man. And immediately, it busted open. Vargas dropped down, and there was a bad cut. And if you have high cheekbones and you get cut here, it's gonna swell. And it started swelling, and the whole eye did, really. And from that point on, Vargas came back and fought hard, but I felt that Miura was controlling the action and getting the better action. And late in the 8th round, he had Vargas trapped on the ropes, and it almost looked like Vargas was out on his feet. He wasn't, he walked back to his corner as the bell sounded. He kind of got saved by the bell, but he wasn't returning fire. And it almost looked like he was on his way to going out. And suddenly, man, he came out in the 9th round and landed a nice hard right hand. The same shot that hurt Miura in the first round. This time it badly hurt him. It's almost as if he didn't see it coming. And what I liked is he kind of shot it over the top, this right hand. Miura kind of moved back like this, the shot hurt him. And instead of telegraphing a left hand, what Vargas did that was intelligent, that showed craft, you boxing purist, is he came with a right uppercut. You don't see that a lot. You don't see a straight right and then a right uppercut. But that's what he did. So when Miura ducked down, bam, he just went right into that right uppercut. And that lifted Miura. Then he came over with a left hook. It was a beautiful, perfect combination. It was thrown slow enough. He didn't go bap, bap, bap. It was kind of bap, bap, bap. It just was timed perfectly, placed perfectly. Miura was done. He fell. Dude, this Japanese fighter has balls. He got up, and it took him a second. He tried to get up. It took him a few attempts to get on his feet. And then he put his arms up to Tony Weeks, basically saying, I'm okay. Do not stop this damn fight. And to Tony Weeks' credit, he didn't. Miura tried to fight back. He tried to hold, but he was just badly, badly buzzed. And Vargas kept teeing off. And finally, after about a minute of that, Tony Weeks wisely stopped the fight. So Vargas gets a 9th round, come from behind, win, grabs the title. And how about this? Miguel Cotto didn't show up for the post-fight press conference. that night. Francisco Vargas had to go to the hospital to get everything checked out. He returned from the hospital to attend the post-fight press conference and talk to us in the media. That is true professionalism, and that is showing that you give a shit, okay? You gotta love that in Vargas. People are already talking about a rematch. I absolutely agree, there needs to be a rematch, but there needs to be no rush on it. The rematch should happen in the summer to fall of next year. Both of these fighters need to heal, okay? When it does happen, it's perfect for StubHub. And in the main event, Canelo Alvarez wins the WBC middleweight title and the lineal title. Gets very, very friendly scorecards. 117, 111, 118, 110, 119, 109. Just for the record, I scored it 116, 112. These scores were pretty shitty, but the right man won. Could it be that this had something to do with Cotto dumping the belt and that the judges were kind of being a little hard on him or something? I've heard that, you know, it's kind of a conspiracy theory. I don't know. I don't like the scores, but again, the right man won, and this wasn't a close fight, guys, okay? There are some people out there saying that Cotto won this fight or that it was very close. It just wasn't. It was not a close fight. I was being as friendly as I could be to Cotto when I scored at 116, 112 because he was the champion. And I wanted to make sure I gave him that respect as the champion, the veteran fighter. Most people that I talked to right there ringside in press row and over in the media center during the post-fight press conference, most of them had it 117, 111, and a few had it 116, 112 like I did. I didn't find anybody, even Puerto Rican media there, that scored it for Cotto. So for Cotto to say, I guess there was a soundbite where he claims he won 8 rounds in the fight and everything, guys, that's just ridiculous. And for him to not show up at the post-fight press conference because he feels he was robbed, very unprofessional, very diva-like. And Cotto's kind of turned into a diva in the last couple years of his career. And I guess that's his prerogative because he spent so many years making concessions, fighting everybody. You know, he fought Antonio Margarito when Floyd Mayweather flat out ducked him. He fought Manny Pacquiao when Pacquiao was being ducked by Mayweather. And he actually fought Pacquiao at a catchweight, right? One of my friends, Jeff, who's a lifelong boxing guy, he's actually the one who brought it to my attention. He said, you know what? Cotto faced better versions of Canelo, Mosley, and Pacquiao than Floyd Mayweather did. And I thought about that. He's right. I mean, Miguel Cotto has kind of earned the right to be a little bit of a douchebag later in his career. I don't like some of the stunts he's been pulling, but the guy's, like I said, he's done everything. So where does Cotto go from here? Well, he made a guaranteed $15 million. And he's obviously set for life. He has one more fight left in his deal with Rock Nation. He's got a couple of options, okay? He can come back next year and do a farewell kind of fight in the New York area, possibly even Puerto Rico, and call it a day. Or he can try to get a rematch with Canelo. And maybe, this is conspiracy theory Mike talking here, but maybe all this talk about I won 8 rounds and storming out of the ring and refusing to go to the post-fight press conference, maybe this is all a way for him to try to drum up interest in a rematch. Because this card sold very well. The numbers aren't in yet, but it sold very, very well. It's gonna do over 1 million buys, or right around there. So let's talk about the actual fight. Canelo, look, halfway through this fight, I had it 3-3. I thought it was an even fight. And what this whole fight was to me was kind of a technical battle where neither guy really went all out, but both were trying to kind of instill their will against each other while being safe and being defensively responsible. They left themselves open here and there. They got tagged a few times, but for the most part, they were having this technical fight with little bursts of action. The difference is, in the second half of the fight, it kind of went like I thought it would, where Canelo's youth, his strength, his size, and all the wear and tear that Cotto's taken started to it showed up. And every punch that Canelo landed was moving Cotto. Cotto was landing little combinations. He was doing very well with the jab, but a lot of the shots are being blocked by Canelo, and none of them were moving him. The second half of that fight, I think I found one round to give to Cotto, but clearly down the stretch, Canelo was in cruise control. Could he have went for the knockout? Yes. It appeared at times he was kind of trying, but I think he realized, you know what? I got this thing in the bag. Let's play it smart. Let's get the W. I don't know if Canelo is the mentality of fighter that a lot of Mexican fight fans are used to, where he's just gonna go for broke, even in a fight he's dominating, to get that knockout. I think he's one of these guys who's a little more cerebral, a little more of a technician. And one thing I liked that he showed was some good upper body movement. He is kind of plodding with his feet, but he's very, very good with his upper body movement. He slips a lot of shots, just kind of moving at the waist and bending back. And he's gotten a lot better at covering up. He still gets tagged with a lone jab here and there. Cotto was able to just pop out a little jab. But combination punching and stuff, Canelo does very well at covering up and slipping a lot of those. So where does Canelo go from here? Obviously, the WBC mandatory is Gennady Golovkin, and of course, that's the first thing that was brought up in the post-fight press conference. Canelo said he's willing to fight Gennady. He's ready right now. Oscar De La Hoya made it very clear to all of us right after the fight. He told us, guys, these two will fight. Here's the thing. They didn't say when, okay? So expect them to marinate the fight with Golovkin for a while. So I could see a scenario playing out where the WBC allows Canelo to stay their regular titleist for a year or more while Golovkin remains the interim titleist, and they negotiate some kind of thing far down the road. I can also see a scenario playing out where Golden Boy and Rock Nation come together and say, dude, this Cotto-Canelo fight did really, really well. Let's do a rematch, They could come up with all kinds of reasons to do a rematch and people would buy it. So possibly Canelo just says screw it and dumps that WBC title, does a rematch with Cotto, and this time instead of a $5 million guarantee, he's gonna get well over $10 million guaranteed. So those are the two options I see playing out with Canelo Alvarez. This Wednesday in Florida, it is PBC on ESPN. It's kind of a pre-Thanksgiving warm-up. Erislandy Lara goes up against Jan Zevic. Zevic hasn't really done much in recent years. The thing I remember about him is just anytime he stepped up, when he fought Berto, when he fought Thurman, he was thoroughly dominated. But he's a hard guy to knock out, right? I think he injured his eye against Berto, and that's why that fight was stopped early. But he went all 12 with Thurman. I don't see Lara setting the world on fire. We've wanted him to before, so I expect this one to go all 12 rounds. Obviously, I like Lara big. I probably won't be watching this one, though. Saturday night in Quebec, Canada. It's PBC on Showtime. These are PBC fighters. I don't know if it's technically called PBC, but it's a PBC card. It's on Showtime. On Showtime Extreme, they're showing a little bit of the undercard, and that includes Emir Imam, one of the best prospects in all of boxing, going up against Adrian Granados. For Imam, this is his fourth fight of the year. 25 years old, 5'10", 74-inch reach at 140 pounds. I don't know how much longer he's gonna make 140. I think eventually, by the time he's fighting for a title, it'll be at 147. Really good looking prospect. This matchup, I don't know what it does for him. I'm hoping, I like that he was busy this year and he was really busy last year. It's a busy prospect, that's good. But next year, it's time for him to start stepping it up and getting some better caliber opposition. So that's on Showtime Extreme. Then regular Showtime So that's on Showtime Extreme. And then on the regular Showtime, there's a doubleheader there. James DeGale takes on Lucien Boutte at super middleweight. For James DeGale, this is obviously the most experienced opponent he's faced, probably the best overall opponent he's faced. For Boutte, this is in his backyard. It's a chance to grab a title. DeGale has a title belt. DeGale, doesn't do anything particularly great. He does a lot of things good, and he's obviously the younger, fresher guy here. This is probably Boutte's last chance, right? If he grabs a title here, if he can beat DeGale, and you got to think, it's in his backyard, the judges will be friendly to him. Maybe he can get a big money fight next year against one of the other titleists. Al Haymon, the PBC, they have a couple of titleists at 168 pounds. I talked earlier about the super middleweight division and some of the other fighters in it. This is a division that lacks a star. It lacks a moneymaker. If Boutte can grab a title, well, suddenly Al Haymon has a moneymaker because this guy has a big fan base out there in Canada. So, DeGale's going to try to crash the party, but you got to think Boutte might be a favorite here, right? DeGale wants to crash that party, keep the title, and then see if he can unify with one of these other PBC super middleweights. In the main event, Eleider Alvarez, the Colombian fighter, light heavyweight, is 18-0. He's going up against Isaac Chilemba, South African, a guy who's lost a couple times but has never been stopped, right? For Alvarez, if he wins this fight, the winner of this fight is the mandatory for Adonis Stevenson. Adonis Stevenson has kind of just been wasting away in recent years. Alvarez has fought on several undercards of Adonis Stevenson fights. So, obviously, Alvarez is the big favorite here. Look for him to get the win. It'd be nice if he made a statement and became the first guy to stop Chilemba, and make a big, big statement and kind of build up a little bit of a, interest in a fight against Stevenson. He's fought there in Canada a couple times. Those fans up there have seen him. So I like him big in that fight. And, a fight between Stevenson and Alvarez, it's pretty entertaining. Next year in Canada, there should be an entertaining PBC fight. Also, another PBC card. It's actually PBC and NBC during the afternoon, Saturday, from Dallas, Texas. Errol Spence and Jermall Charlo. They both fight opponents that really ain't gonna do shit for them. It's complete showcase fights, so I'm not even gonna talk about the fights or the opponents. Both of them will win by knockout. If you have nothing going on Saturday afternoon, turn it on. The big fight Saturday is in Dusseldorf, Germany. Obviously, the heavyweight champion Vladimir Klitschko is going up against Tyson Fury, the British undefeated trash-talking giant who's a little crazy. Also, HBO, before that fight, they will replay Cotto-Canelo, but not just Cotto-Canelo, they will replay Miura Vargas. So for those of you who didn't get to see that, it's really, really rare that, for a pay-per-view replay the following week, that an undercard fight also is shown. But HBO's done it a couple times, right? They did that with the Triple G Lemieux pay-per-view, where the following week they didn't just show Triple G Lemieux, they also showed Gonzalez Valoria. So they're doing that again here. I thought that's really, really cool. This will be a nice triple header on free or regular HBO. There I go with my hand quotes. Damn it, I do that too much. Talk with my hands too much. But let's talk about Klitschko-Fury. Vlad, he signed a 3-fight deal with HBO last year. This will be the third fight in that deal. And all 3 opponents he's faced were legitimate top 10 guys. You guys know I did a video about Klitschko a few months back. Is Vladimir Klitschko an all-time great heavyweight? And I believe he is. He's almost 40 years old. And he's been easier to hit in recent fights. Kubrat Pulev nailed him with some hard shots, even with some 1-2s, right, combinations. Bryant Jennings, who actually had longer arms than Klitschko, was able to land several hard shots right on the button. Tyson Fury has longer arms than Vlad. He's taller than Vlad. He's the bigger, heavier guy. So the question here is, can this much younger fighter, Fury's like 12 years younger, can he impose his youth against the older man, kind of like Cotto and Canelo. You know, obviously I wouldn't put Fury up there with Canelo in terms of skill or anything, but you know, it is interesting. It's an interesting matchup. Here's the thing, you know, and this is just where my mind goes. Fury has faced nobody in the stratosphere of Vladimir Klitschko. This isn't just a step up in opposition, it's a quantum leap, right? The best fighter Fury has faced is probably Steve Cunningham, the former cruiserweight champion, who should still be fighting at cruiserweight. He has no business fighting at heavyweight. And Cunningham dropped him, but you know, Fury was playing around, and you know, it's not hard to get dropped in boxing if you're not paying attention. That really didn't surprise me or bother me that Cunningham dropped him. What was more telling to me is that that fight was even after 6 or 7 rounds. I think on the cards it was, you know, a majority draw or something. It was close to that. The scorecards were almost even when Fury finally knocked out Cunningham. So he was on his way possibly to losing a fight against a much smaller guy, right? So what has he learned since then? He's definitely fought more disciplined since then. In the rematch with Chisora, he fought very, very disciplined. I thought he fought a really, really great fight against Chisora in that rematch and dominated him. But Chisora is, again, one of these small, stout kind of heavyweights. Klitschko's much bigger and more athletic. So, you know, I don't know, to me, what's going to be interesting about this fight is when Klitschko lands that first straight right hand. You know, it's probably not going to come in the first round. It might take to the second round or something, but eventually he's going to see the opening. He's going to shoot it. When he lands right in the button, what does Fury do? Obviously, Fury's been preparing for that right hand, so he should see it coming. But when it lands, does he kind of get a little crazy and just start swinging for the fences? Does he get defensive and just back up and clinch for the rest of the fight? I don't know. I tend to believe that at some point, Fury's going to kind of go for broke. And when that happens, I think it'll be around the middle rounds. I think he might put some leather on Vlad. He might hurt Vlad at some point, buzz him. But this version of Klitschko knows what to do when he's hurt, when he's buzzed. He'll clinch, he'll hold, he'll do what he has to do to recover. And I think Vlad will catch Fury once he starts getting a little crazy and a little undisciplined and knock him out. TKO stoppage, mid to late rounds. That's the possibility, you know, that I think fans would like to see. What I hope doesn't happen is this turns into a really, really hard to watch clinch fest. I could see that happening. I could see both guys landing punches early and getting each other's attention enough, or buzzing each other enough, where both guys say, I don't want no more of that, and it turns into a jab, jab, clinch type of thing. In that case, obviously I like Klitschko by 12-round decision, like 10 rounds to 2 or something, but I just hope that doesn't happen because this has the potential to be a really entertaining heavyweight fight. So I hope we get Klitschko mid-late rounds TKO, but part of me worries we're gonna get Klitschko horribly boring decision.